She slammed the letter down on the station master's desk and looked him dead in the eyes. He left. The man who hired me just left. And you knew, didn't you? The station master said nothing. He just looked at her, all 5 feet 2 inches of her, and slowly shook his head like she was already a problem he didn't want. That's the moment Anna Caldwell understood exactly what she was up against. Not the mountain, not the cold, the people. If you've ever been told you were too small, too soft, too quiet to matter, stay with me. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because what happens next will change the way you see strength forever. The letter had promised everything. A classroom, a community, a fresh start in a place where no one knew her name or her history or the particular way her mother used to look at her across the dinner table. That long, tired look that said, "I don't know what will become of you, Anna." She had folded that letter so many times the creases had gone soft. She knew every word by heart. She had read it on the train through Missouri. She had read it again crossing into Kansas. And somewhere in the long, rattling hours between the last town with a proper telegraph office and the first real glimpse of the Rockies rising up from the earth, like something God had pushed through the ground in a moment of anger, she had stopped reading it and started believing it. That was her first mistake. The wagon that carried her from the rail depot to the settlement of Harrow's Creek took 4 hours over roads that barely deserved the name. The driver, a leathery man named Gus, who had roughly 3 teeth and an opinion about everything, kept glancing at her from the corner of his eye, the way you glance at something you're not sure is going to make the trip. "You're the new teacher," Gus finally said. Not a question, really. More like an accusation. "I am." She waited. "Is there something wrong with that?" "No, ma'am." He clicked his tongue at the horses. "Just we had a teacher here 2 winters back. Big fella. Came out from Ohio. Thought he knew everything." He paused for effect the way men, like Gus, always paused for effect. "Left in January. Said the cold got into his bones and wouldn't leave." Anna kept her eyes on the horizon. "I'm not afraid of cold." Gus made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. It was more like the sound a man makes when he's too polite to say, "Sure you're not, sweetheart," out loud. She let it go. She had been letting things go her whole life. She was very, very good at it. Harrow's Creek was smaller than she expected and larger than she feared. There were maybe 40 families, she would count them later, when she had time spread across a valley that pressed up close against the eastern face of the mountains like it was trying to hide there. There was a general store, a livery, a church with a crooked steeple, and a cluster of rough timber buildings that people called the Main Street, with what seemed to Anna like a great deal of optimism. People stopped what they were doing when the wagon rolled in. Not in the curious, welcoming way that small towns sometimes greet a newcomer. In the assessing way. The way you watch something enter your territory and try to decide in the first 3 seconds whether it belongs. A woman with a baby on her hip leaned toward the woman next to her. She didn't bother to lower her voice. "That's the new school teacher. Apparently." "Lord, she looks like a strong wind would take her." Anna climbed down from the wagon without help, picked up her suitcase, and walked in the direction of the building. Gus had pointed toward the one with a sign above the door that read, Harrow's Creek General Administration, which was a grand title for what turned out to be a single room with a desk, 2 chairs, and a man who did not stand up when she entered. His name was Aldous Fenn. He was the man who had written the letter. How was also, she would discover in approximately 4 minutes, a coward. How was a soft man. Not physically, he was broad enough with big square hands and a face that had probably been handsome once. But there was something collapsed about him. Something that had given way under pressure a long time ago and never quite recovered. He looked at her the way the station master had looked at her. The way Gus had looked at her. "Miss Caldwell." He didn't offer his hand. "You made the journey." "I did." "You're smaller than I expected." She set her suitcase down. "My teaching credentials are exactly the size you were told." Something flickered across his face. Not quite irritation. Not quite respect. Something in between. "Sit down." She sat. "I'll be honest with you," Aldous Fenn said, which was almost certainly the least honest sentence he had ever spoken in his life. The situation has changed since I wrote that letter." The air in the room went still. "What situation?" Anna said carefully. "The schoolhouse." He folded his hands on the desk. "It needs repairs, significant repairs. I had expected to have them done before your arrival, but—" "Where is it?" "I'm explaining. Where is the schoolhouse, Mr. Fenn?" He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that means someone is deciding how much of the truth to give you. "It burned," he said. "Last month. Lightning strike. We've got the frame still, but the interior is gone. The roof is partially gone." Anna absorbed this. She was good at absorbing bad news. She had been absorbing it since she was 9 years old, and her father came home from the bank with empty pockets and a look on his face like a man who had just watched his whole life fall off the edge of a table. "All right," she said. "When does the rebuilding start?" Fenn shifted in his chair. "That's the thing. Mr. Fenn, it's been a hard season. The community doesn't have the means right now to—" "Are you telling me," Anna said very quietly, very precisely, "that there is no school?" He said nothing. "And no money to build one?" "Nothing." "And you knew this before I traveled 300 miles to get here?" The silence in that room was extraordinary. It had weight to it. It had texture. Anna could feel it pressing against her sternum like a fist. Fenn finally looked away from her. He looked at the wall, the window, the floor, anywhere but her eyes. "I thought something might come through," he said weakly. "A donation, some kind of arrangement. I was hopeful." "You were hoping," Anna said, "that I would arrive and somehow solve a problem you didn't have the courage to tell me about." He didn't deny it. "Is there housing?" she said. "You promised housing." He unclenched his hands, reclenched them. "The family that was meant to host you has—" There was a situation. The husband took ill, and the wife's mother came to stay. They don't have the room. The walls of the room seemed to move slightly closer together. "So," Anna said, and her voice, God bless it, her voice did not shake. "No school, no classroom, no housing. What exactly is it that you do have for me, Mr. Fenn?" He reached into his desk drawer and produced an envelope. "Train fare," he said. "Back to St. Louis. I thought, given the circumstances, it would be the kindest thing." Anna looked at the envelope. She looked at it for a long time. Then she stood up, picked up her suitcase, and walked to the door. "Keep it," she said. "Miss Caldwell, be reasonable. You have nowhere to go. The weather is—" "I said keep it." She walked out into the cold afternoon air and stood on the main street of Harrow's Creek with her suitcase at her feet and 40 strangers watching her, and she did something she had not allowed herself to do since she boarded the train in St. Louis. She breathed. Just breathed. Because if she stopped moving, if she let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened, she would sit down on that wooden sidewalk and she would not get up. And she had made herself a promise a long time ago that she would always get up. Her mother had told her she was delicate. The word had followed Anna through childhood, like a shadow with her name on it. Delicate. Said with love, technically. Said with that particular brand of maternal worry that is also underneath it, a kind of disbelief. "You're too delicate for this world, Anna. Let your brother carry that. Let someone else handle it. Come inside. Rest. You look pale." She wasn't pale. She was tired of being managed. Her father was less poetic about it. He called her slight, said it like an apology. "She's slight, the girl, takes after my mother's side." As if her body were a piece of furniture that had arrived slightly damaged from the factory, and everyone had decided to be polite about it. Her first employer, a private school in St. Louis, had hired her because her references were excellent and let her go after 1 semester, because the parents' quote felt more comfortable with someone who presented a stronger physical authority. What they meant was she was too small. What they didn't know was that every classroom she had ever taught had gone silent. Not because she raised her voice, she never raised her voice, but because she had a particular way of looking at you when you were being dishonest, that made you feel uncomfortably that she had already seen every lie you had ever told in your entire life and had simply been waiting for you to catch up. Children responded to that. Adults generally found it irritating. She had tried for a while to be different. to be bigger, to take up more space, to speak in the lower register that she had read about in a pamphlet about feminine authority. She tried wearing her hair up in a style that added 2 inches to her height. She tried a pair of boots with a modest heel. None of it made a single difference. Because the world had decided what Anna Caldwell was, and the world was not particularly interested in being corrected. So at 28 years old, with no position and no home and no family, left to return to her mother had passed 2 years prior. Her father. The winter before that, she had answered an advertisement in a St. Louis newspaper. Teacher sought. Remote mountain settlement, Colorado territory. Room and board provided. Serious inquiries only. She had written a letter. Aldous Fenn had written back. And here she was. There was a woman named Clara Hobbs who ran the boarding house. Clara Hobbs was maybe 60, built like a woman who had been doing hard work since before Anna was born, with gray hair pinned back severely, and eyes the color of good river stone, gray-green and sharp, and completely without sentimentality. She was sweeping her front step when Anna walked past with her suitcase, and she watched Anna the same way everyone else in Harrow's Creek had watched her, with that measuring, skeptical squint. But then she said something none of the others had said. "You look like you just got some bad news." Anna stopped. "I did," she said. "Fenn." "Yes." Clara swept a few more strokes. "He does that. Promises things, and then hands you an envelope with train fare in it when they don't work out." She paused. "Did you take the money?" "No." Clara looked at her properly then. Full on, not a glance. "Huh," she said. "I need a room," Anna said. "I can pay for a week. After that I'll need to find work, so I may need to negotiate." "What kind of work?" "Teaching ideally. But I've kept accounts, I've done mending, I can cook, I'm a fair hand at." "Can you stand the cold?" Anna blinked. "I haven't been here long enough to know." This apparently was the right answer. Clara gave a short, decisive nod, as though Anna had passed some test she hadn't known she was taking. "Come in," Clara said. "I'll charge you fair, and you can owe me the rest until you find your feet." Anna followed her inside. It was the first genuine kindness she had encountered since arriving, and it almost undid her. She held herself together with the same quiet, private ferocity she used for everything. She spent her first 3 nights in Harrow's Creek learning its rhythms. The town woke early and went cold fast after sundown. The wind came off the mountains in the late afternoon, like something that had made a decision and wasn't going to negotiate. People moved with the efficient, no-nonsense urgency of people who have learned the hard way that wasted time in a place like this is not abstract. It cost you something real. Wood, heat, daylight, safety. She watched. She listened. She started to understand which people were worth talking to, and which ones were just going to look at her, the way Gus had looked at her from the wagon. There was a blacksmith named Rudolph who was missing his left index finger and had opinions about weather patterns that were, as far as Anna could tell, mostly accurate. There was a woman named Beth Pierce who ran the trading corner of the general store and who had taught herself to read at age 42 from a Bible and a seed catalog, and who had thoughts about education that were roughly as sophisticated as anything Anna had encountered at the Teachers' College in St. Louis. There were children, of course, everywhere. Underfoot and loud and unoccupied in the way children get when there is no structure to fill their days. On her second morning, 3 of them followed her down the main street at a distance, whispering to each other and periodically dissolving into laughter. She stopped walking. She turned around. The 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, none of them older than 10, froze in place, like deer who hadn't expected the thing they were tracking to turn around. "Good morning," Anna said. Silence. "Can you read?" she said to the tallest one. He shook his head. "Can you?" to the girl. A small, reluctant nod. "A little," the girl said. "What's your name?" "Maggie." "Maggie. I'm Miss Caldwell. I was supposed to be your teacher." She let that sit for a moment. "I'm still working on the supposed to part." Maggie stared at her. "Mr. Fenn says the school's gone." "The building's gone," Anna said. "The school isn't gone. A school is just people. People and books and time." She looked at all 3 of them. Do you have time? They glanced at each other. The smaller boy said slowly, I got chores till noon. Afternoon then, Anna said. Tell anyone who wants to learn to read to meet me at the church steps. I'll be there. She walked away before any of them could point out that she had no books, no chalk, no board, and no official standing to teach anyone anything. She had been working with less than that her whole life. By the fourth day, Anna had 7 children showing up at the church steps in the afternoon. By the 5th day it was 11. She taught them on scraps of paper that Clara gave her from old invoices. She scratched letters in the dirt with a stick when the paper ran out. She used stones to teach counting. She taught them a poem not because poetry was practical, but because the rhythm of it stuck in their heads in a way that plain sentences didn't, and because the first time little Maggie recited 4 full lines from memory without stumbling. Her face did something that Anna had never been able to put into words, but had spent her whole career chasing. That was the school, not the building, not the curriculum, or the credentials, or the approved textbooks. That look on Maggie's face. Word got around the way things do in small places. Not through announcement, through the particular telegraph of children who come home different, who have something to say at supper that they didn't have the day before, whose eyes are moving when they look at the sign over the general store, really moving like the letters are starting to mean something. Several parents came to see for themselves. A few of them thanked her. 2 of them looked uncomfortable the way people look when they realize they've underestimated something and don't know how to recalibrate. One father, a big broad man named Walt Chambers, who had the look of someone who had been arguing with the land his whole life and had mostly lost, stood at the edge of the churchyard and watched his daughter trace letters in the dirt with a stick. He watched for a long time. She do this on her own, he finally said. She did, Anna said. She's very quick. He scratched the back of his neck. Don't suppose I mean she's a girl, it's not like... Mr. Chambers. Anna's voice was pleasant and completely unyielding. Your daughter is one of the fastest learners I have ever taught in 11 years of teaching. What she becomes is going to depend on what you decide she's worth. I already know what she's worth. The question is whether you do. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his daughter in the dirt. How long you planning to stay? He said finally. As long as I'm needed, Anna said. He nodded once. It was not an apology, but it was something. On her 7th day in Harrows Creek, Aldous Fenn came to find her. He came at midday, which meant he timed it so the main street would be busy, which meant he was the kind of man who liked witnesses when he thought he was going to be in the right. Miss Caldwell. He stopped in front of her. She was carrying a bucket of water from the pump, which she intended to do herself because Clara had enough to manage. I need to speak with you. I'm listening. I've received a complaint, he said with the gravity of a man who believes complaints are important, about your informal lessons. From whom? That's the particulars aren't. From whom, Mr. Fenn? He looked at her. His jaw worked. From several community members who feel you are exceeding your standing here. You have no official position, no sanctioned space. You are technically a private citizen with no more right to... I'm teaching children to read, Anna said. In the open air, for free. Would you like to explain to me what exactly is harmful about that? The point is, she said, and her voice was still level, still quiet, but there was something underneath it now, like water running fast under ice. That you left 11 children with no teacher and no school and no plan. And I showed up without a building or a salary or official standing, and I am teaching them anyway. So if the community has a concern, Mr. Fenn, I'm happy to hear it directly. But I suspect what you really mean is that someone is embarrassed. His face went through several changes. The winter is coming, he said finally. Proper winter, not what we've had. You understand what that means in the mountains? Not yet, she said, but I'll learn. You can't stay at Clara's through the winter on nothing. The mountain isn't. He stopped, started again. Women alone don't. Is that all? She said. He pressed his lips together. Take the money, Miss Caldwell. Go home. I don't have a home, she said simply. That's rather the point. She picked up her bucket and walked away. Behind her, she heard him make a sound. Low, frustrated, a little bit baffled, the sound of a man who expected a door to open and found a wall instead. That evening, Clara Hobbs poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from Anna at the kitchen table and said very calmly, "You're going to need a plan before the first hard freeze." "I know. And by a plan I don't mean children and sticks in the dirt. I mean food. I mean firewood. I mean somewhere that doesn't cost you money you don't have. I know. There's not a lot of options in this valley once the passes close." Clara wrapped her hands around her cup. "Once those mountains shut you in, you stay shut in. You understand this isn't St. Louis. It's not, it doesn't negotiate." Anna was quiet for a moment. "What would you do?" she said. Clara looked at her across the table. Looked at her the way she had looked at her that first morning, fully, carefully, without pity. "There's a man named Cross," Clara said. "Daniel Cross. Lives up above the valley about a day's ride. He comes to town 3-4 times a year. Gets his supplies, does his business, talks to almost nobody." "What about him?" "He's got a cabin. It's a big cabin. He built it himself." Clara paused. "He doesn't take people in. Doesn't take anybody in. But I've heard him say more than once that the valley needs a teacher, needs a school. He came from educated people, even if you'd never know it to look at him." "You think he'd take in a stranger?" "I think," Clara said slowly, "that you're the kind of woman he might listen to. Not because you're small, because you stayed." Anna turned her coffee cup in her hands. "What do people say about him?" she said. "The ones who call him dangerous." Clara was quiet for a moment. "They say he's too comfortable with being alone," she said. "They say he's got a temper when pushed. They say he's gone feral up there in the mountains." She took a sip of her coffee. "What I say is a man who's lived alone in the wilderness for 8 years and is still standing is a man who knows something the rest of us don't." Has any woman?" "No," Clara said. "None that I know of." She set down her cup. "But then most women would have taken Fenn's envelope." The fire in the kitchen stove crackled and settled. "Where do I find him?" Anna said. She found him in the end because she went looking. Not after asking permission. Not after consulting with Fenn, or waiting for someone to introduce them, or doing any of the 10 sensible, cautious things that sensible, cautious women were supposed to do before approaching a man they'd been warned about. She heard he was in town for supplies. Maggie's father, Walt Chambers, mentioned it in passing, watching to see how she reacted, and she went to the general store, and she walked through the door, and there he was. Her first impression of Daniel Cross was more than she had expected. More than the stories had made room for. He was standing at the far end of the counter, going through a list with the kind of focused attention that blocked out everything around him, and she registered in quick succession, very tall, very broad. A coat that had been mended in 3 places, hands that were capable and scarred and completely still. While he read a face that was not handsome exactly, not in the careful, composed way of men who are aware of being handsome, but interesting. The kind of face that had been shaped by weather and time, and she suspected considerable grief. He did not look up when she entered. She walked over to him. "Mr. Cross," she said. He looked up. His eyes were dark gray, the color of slate after rain, and they did the same thing to her that she had done to Fenn's door. They met her like a wall. Clear. Certain. Not unkind, but not yielding. "I don't believe we've met," he said. "We haven't. I'm Anna Caldwell. I came to Harrow's Creek to teach school." "I heard about that." His voice was lower than she expected, and quieter. Not soft, precise, like someone who didn't waste words because he'd learned the cost of them. "I heard the school burned." "The building burned," she said. "I'm still here." Something shifted in his expression. Not much, but enough. "What do you want, Miss Caldwell?" "I need a practical arrangement," she said. "Before the first hard freeze. Clara Hobbs told me about your cabin. I'm told it's large. I'm told you know the value of a teacher." She paused. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm offering to be useful in whatever way a second pair of hands is useful in exchange for a roof and provisions through the winter." He looked at her for a long time. The kind of looking that evaluates rather than judges. The kind that is actually doing something. "You know what the mountain is in January," he said. "No," she said, "but I'm a fast learner." "People say that," he said. "Usually they stop saying it around the third week of December. Then you'll have the satisfaction of being right." She met his eyes. "If I leave?" Another silence. The proprietor of the general store was pretending to organize a shelf nearby with great intensity. 2 other customers had stopped moving. Daniel Cross folded his list and put it in his coat pocket. "You'd have your own space," he said. "Your own work. I'm not looking for company." "Neither am I," Anna said. "I'm looking for survival." He studied her face. Whatever he found there, it was enough. "I'm heading back at first light," he said. "Be at the livery at dawn. Don't bring more than you can carry yourself." He picked up the rest of his supplies. He walked past her toward the door. At the threshold, without turning around, he said, "Don't be late." He was gone. Anna stood in the middle of the store with her heart hammering and her face perfectly composed, and the proprietor looked at her with something between astonishment and respect. "Well," he said. "Well," she agreed. She walked back to Clara's boarding house and sat on the edge of the bed in her small cold room, and she let herself feel it, the full vertigo of what she had just done. She had no guarantee. She had his word, which was the word of a man she had known for exactly 6 minutes and a half. She was about to ride into a mountain with a stranger and put her winter and possibly her life in the hands of someone who by all accounts preferred the wilderness to people. She thought about her mother. Delicate. She thought about Fen and his envelope. She thought about Maggie tracing letters in the dirt. She thought about the way Daniel Cross had looked at her, not at her size, not at her coat, not at the impractical small suitcase, but at her face. Her face. Like he was trying to read something there. Like he was looking for the real thing. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling and breathed. "Don't be late," he had said. She had absolutely no intention of being late. She was at the livery before dawn. He was already there. Of course he was. He glanced at her suitcase, then at her. He said nothing about it. He handed her a horse that was smaller than the one he was riding, steady-looking and calm. "Her name is Birch," he said. "She'll spook at sudden movement on the left side. She's half blind in that eye. Don't forget." "I won't," Anna said. She mounted. He watched, not to judge the doing of it, she realized, but to see if she needed help and to arrange his face so that the offer wouldn't embarrass her if she didn't. She didn't need help. He turned his horse toward the mountain. She followed. They rode in silence for the first hour, which suited Anna perfectly because the mountain was doing something she had not been prepared for. It was filling up her entire field of vision, and it was loud in a completely silent way, loud with scale and mass, and the kind of impassive ancient authority that made every concern she had ever had feel approximately the size of a dust mote. "You're staring," Daniel said without looking back. "I've never seen mountains up close," she said. A pause. "What do you think?" she considered. "I think I understand now why people who live here stop making excuses." He turned his head slightly. Not enough to look at her, but enough. "What does that mean?" "You can't negotiate with something that size," she said. "You just deal with it, or you don't." He faced forward again, was quiet. Then, "That's a better answer than most people give." "What do most people say?" "They say it's beautiful." "It is," Anna said. "That's not the interesting thing about it." This time he actually turned and looked at her. And Anna Caldwell, who had been told her entire life that she was too small and too slight and too fragile for the world, looked back at Daniel Cross with the same steady, unblinking calm she had given every person who had ever underestimated her. And this time, for the first time in longer than she could remember, the person looking back did not look away first. He turned forward and rode on. But something had shifted. She could feel it in the changed quality of his silence, less closed, more thoughtful. Like a door that was still shut, but had somewhere in its frame developed a crack that let the light through. She had spent a decade learning to read the silences of people who didn't want to be read. This one she thought was going to be worth learning. The trail steepened gradually, the kind of steepening you don't notice at first, because it happens in such small increments. One moment you're on something resembling flat ground, and the next you realize the horse beneath you is working differently, leaning into the effort, and the world behind you has dropped away without your permission. Anna gripped the reins with the calibrated looseness Daniel had not told her to use, but that she had noticed him using enough control to communicate loose enough not to fight. Birch moved steadily beneath her, half-blind and perfectly reliable. Anna had developed an immediate and sincere affection for the horse, which she suspected said something unflattering about her relationship with people. They stopped once to water the horses at a stream she heard before she saw it. Daniel dismounted with the economical ease of someone whose body had long since stopped wasting motion on anything unnecessary. He filled a canteen. He did not ask if she needed water. He simply filled a second canteen and set it on a rock near her horse's head, where she could reach it without asking. That small thing, that small considered utterly unsentimental thing. She filed it away. "How far?" she said. "3 more hours if the weather holds." She looked at the sky, then at him. "Does it usually hold?" "No," Daniel said. He capped his canteen. "But it's holding now. That's all you can ask." He remounted. She remounted. They rode on. The first thing Daniel Cross did when they reached the cabin was nothing she expected. He didn't show her around, didn't give her a tour or an explanation or any of the social scaffolding a person instinctively constructs when they bring someone new into their space. He unsaddled his horse, handed her the reins to Birch, with a look that clearly communicated the expectation that she would do the same, and disappeared inside. She unsaddled Birch. She found the stable without being told, because there was only one outbuilding, and it smelled like hay. She settled the horse, filled the water trough from the barrel beside the door, found the feed without looking too hard, and came out to find Daniel standing on the cabin's porch watching her. Not with approval exactly, with recalibration. "You've been around horses," he said. "My uncle had a farm," Anna said. "I spent summers there until I was 14. He nodded once. The door opened. She followed him inside. The cabin was one large room divided into purposeful zones. A cooking area near the hearth. A working area near the north window where the light was best, sleeping quarters behind a heavy curtain strung on a rope. The whole thing was clean in the way of places where cleanliness is not aesthetic preference but operational requirement. Mess costs you things in a place like this. She understood that immediately. A second area, smaller, was separated from the main room by a half-wall that had clearly been added. Later, the wood was a slightly different shade, with a narrow bed frame and a chest of drawers. "Yours," Daniel said, nodding at it. "Thank you. There's a lock on the chest, keys in the drawer." She looked at him. He was already moving to the hearth, building a fire with the layered efficiency of someone who has built 10,000 fires and thinks about it the way most people think about breathing. "Why are you telling me about the lock?" she said. He didn't look up from the fire. "Because you should know it's there." "I wasn't worried." "I know." He set a piece of birchwood across the grate. "I'm telling you so you don't have to wonder." It took her a moment to understand that this was not a practical statement about furniture. It was a contract. The only one he was going to offer, and she understood without further discussion that it was ironclad. That a man who lived by the precise, unambiguous logic of the mountain would mean exactly what he said, and not one syllable more or less. She put her suitcase down by the chest. She did not say thank you again. She had the instinct that thanking him too much would embarrass both of them. "What do you need done before dark?" she said. He finally looked at her. "You don't need to start tonight." "I didn't ask about starting," she said. "I asked what needs doing." He studied her. Then he said, "Wood's low. Stack on the east side needs to be brought in before the temperature drops. Water barrel needs filling before it freezes over. There's a latch on the stable door that's been sticking. I haven't fixed it yet." "I'll do the wood and the water," Anna said. "The latch show me once, and I'll do it myself next time." He opened his mouth. closed it. He showed her the latch. She worked until her shoulders burned. She didn't stop because her shoulders burned. She stopped when the work was done, which was a distinction that turned out to matter enormously in the weeks that followed. That first night they ate in the kind of quiet that was not uncomfortable, but was not yet comfortable either. The quiet of two people who are still calibrating the distance between them, still figuring out which silences are full and which ones are empty. He had cooked something with dried venison and root vegetables that was simple and hot and exactly what a body needed after a full day on horseback in cold air. She ate all of it, which seemed to register with him in the same way the horse had registered as data, as information about what kind of person she actually was, versus what kind of person he had assumed she would be. "You're not what I expected," he said at last. "No one ever is," Anna said. "But people keep expecting anyway." A short pause. "What did Fen tell you about me when he first wrote to you?" "Nothing," she said. "His letter described the position, the settlement, the children who needed teaching." She turned her cup in her hands. "He didn't mention you at all." "Then how did you find me?" "Clara Hobbs." Something moved across his face, something that might have been warmth if it had more room to move in. "Clara's a good woman." "She is." Anna looked at him. "She said you came from educated people." How was quiet for a moment. "My father was a professor. University of Virginia. Greek and Latin." A pause. "He used to say the only honest education was one that taught you how small you were." "And you disagreed?" "No." Daniel set down his cup. "I disagreed with where he thought that lesson led. He thought it led to humility. I think it leads to honesty." Anna thought about that. "What's the difference?" "Humility is about how you see yourself," he said. "Honesty is about what you actually do." She looked at him across the table. At this man who had built this cabin with his own hands in the middle of a wilderness, who had lived alone for 8 years, who was called dangerous by people who had met him for approximately 3 minutes. Who had just made the most philosophically sophisticated remark she had heard since leaving St. Louis. "Why are you here?" she said. "Really, not the mountain answer." He looked back at her for a long time. "I had a life before," he said. "In Denver. I was a surveyor. I had a business partner friend. We had contracts work. We had—" He stopped, started differently. "There was an accident. Winter survey bad conditions. He fell. I didn't." Another pause, and this one had weight in it. "I came here because the mountain doesn't ask why." Anna was very still. "I'm sorry," she said. "It was 8 years ago." "I know." She held his gaze. "I'm still sorry." He looked down at his cup. Something in his posture changed, not softened exactly, but loosened. The way a knot loosens when you stop pulling on it from one direction. "Get some sleep," he said. "First full day starts early." She went behind her curtain. She lay in the narrow bed and stared at the rough ceiling and thought about a professor's son who had chosen the wilderness because it didn't ask why, and a woman who had chosen this wilderness because she had nowhere else honest to go, and how very strange it was that the world had put them in the same cabin at the edge of the same mountain at the same turning of the year. She did not find this strange in a frightening way. She found it strange in the way of things that might eventually make a particular kind of sense. The first 2 weeks were purely about survival, and she was grateful for that because surviving left no room for anything else. Every morning began before light. The fire had to be rebuilt, not maintained, because Daniel banked it low at night to save wood, and banking it low meant rebuilding from coal in the pre-dawn darkness, which she learned the hard way on the second morning and then never got wrong again. Water had to be drawn before the creek surface iced, which gave her approximately 40 minutes after first light before the window closed. Horses needed feeding stable, needed mucking. Breakfast was simple and fast. You ate to work, not for pleasure. Then the day opened up, and she and Daniel moved through it in parallel, each with their separate tasks, occasionally intersecting, occasionally needing the other's help, and asking for it directly and simply, because this was not a place where indirect communication was sustainable. She made mistakes. She made a lot of mistakes. She split her thumb open, learning to use the axe correctly. She let the water barrel overflow twice before she understood the exact timing. She burned the stew on the third night because she misjudged how fast the fire ran hot, and she stood there and looked at the burned pot and felt for one very clear and specific moment the exact weight of the word failure. Then she cleaned the pot, made something else from what was left, set it on the table. Daniel looked at it, looked at her. "Different than what I was planning," she said. "Smells fine," he said. They ate. She got back up the next morning and did it again. And the morning after that. By the end of the second week, she had stopped burning things. What she had not anticipated, what no one had told her, and she could not have understood from the outside was how much the mountain talked, not in the poetic sense, in the profoundly literal sense, that once you were inside the rhythms of it, once you were attuned to its sounds and its silences, and the particular quality of the cold at different hours, and the way the animals moved when something was coming, the mountain communicated constantly. It told you when the weather was shifting before the sky showed it. It told you when the snow would be wet, and when it would be dry, and which kind killed you faster if you were caught in it. Daniel understood this language the way Anna understood written English, effortlessly, automatically, in the way of someone who had been fluent for so long, they no longer remembered learning. She began studying him the way she had studied everything important in her life, quietly, consistently, without drawing attention to the fact that she was doing it. She watched how he moved through the day. She watched what he checked first when he went outside in the morning wind direction before anything else. Then the horses, then the sky, then the wood supply. She watched how he read the snow, not just looked at it, read it the way she read a page, extracting information. She watched what he ate before a hard day, and what he ate before a day where he expected trouble, and how the two things were different in ways that were not accidental. He noticed her watching. Most people would have found it intrusive. He seemed to find it something else entirely. One morning about 3 weeks in, he said without preamble, "The line of gray at the western edge of that cloud system. What does it mean?" She had been watching that cloud system for 2 days. "Storm," she said. "Moving east. The gray means it's carrying moisture, and the line is where the front edge is pushing down cold air." He looked at her. "How did you know that?" "You looked at it 3 times yesterday morning," she said. "Each time you looked, you adjusted what we were doing, the second cord of wood, the extra feed the water barrel. I worked backward from the adjustments." Something that was almost a smile moved at the corner of his mouth. She was beginning to understand, as close as Daniel Cross generally came to a smile in the course of a normal day. "The storm will hit tomorrow night," he said. "We'll need another load of wood in before dark." "I know," Anna said. "I already started." He walked out to see for himself and came back in without a word, which she understood by now to be the equivalent of someone else saying well done. The twist came on a Tuesday. She knew it was Tuesday because she had started keeping a small calendar on the inside of the chest, a private discipline, a way of staying tethered to the ordinary passage of time, and it came not from the mountain, but from Daniel himself, and it changed everything. She thought she understood about what she was doing here. It started with a box. She found it while reorganizing the provisions, something she had taken on, not because he asked, but because efficient provisioning was the kind of thing she was good at, and the current system had the logic of someone who lived alone and didn't need to explain their system to anyone. A flat wooden box pushed far back on the highest shelf behind the dried beans. She wouldn't have noticed it, except that she was reaching for something behind it, and her fingers touched the edge. She pulled it down and looked at it. It was a box of books, not just any books, Latin grammar, Greek primers, a worn copy of Caesar's Gallic Wars with handwritten notes in the margins, in 2 different hands. A thin volume of mathematics that was more advanced than anything she had used at the teacher's college. And at the bottom, wrapped in cloth that had been carefully kept, 3 composition notebooks dense with handwritten text, small and precise. She heard Daniel come in behind her. She turned. He looked at the box in her hands. Something crossed his face. Not anger. Something more complicated, something more exposed. I found it while reorganizing, she said immediately. I wasn't prying. I can put it back exactly. It's all right. His voice was flat, but not cold, controlled. She looked down at the notebooks. Are these yours? He came across the room and took the box from her, not roughly, just decisively. He set it on the table. He looked at it for a moment. My father sent them up with me, he said, when I left Denver. Said I couldn't stop being his son just because I'd decided to go love like an animal. A pause. His words. And the notebooks. A longer pause. I was writing something, he said. Before you came, a record of the plants and animals up here. What I've observed, how they behave, what they tell you about the mountain. He didn't look at her. Nothing important. Anna looked at the notebooks. She thought about a surveyor's son, a professor's son, who had come to the wilderness and spent 8 years watching and learning and writing it all down in small, precise handwriting in a box on the highest shelf where nobody would see it. Nobody but her. That's a natural history, she said. It's just notes. That's what a natural history is, she said. Daniel, this is if you have what I think you have in these notebooks. This is something people would want to read. Something universities would want to... No. Flat. Final. She stopped. He closed the box. She watched him and understood in that moment something about Daniel Cross that the whole of Harrow's Creek had gotten backward. They thought he had come to the mountain to escape. He had come to the mountain to build something quiet and private and real in a world that had taken everything loud and public and visible from him. She said nothing more about the notebooks. But something had shifted between them, permanent and significant, like a key turning in a lock. The weather broke that Thursday in a way that went beyond the storm they had prepared for. It started as snow. Normal, manageable, the kind of snow Daniel had seen 100 times. Then the temperature dropped fast. The kind of fast that the mountain almost never did. The kind of fast that caught even experienced people by surprise, and the snow turned to something harder, and the wind came off the upper slopes with a sound Anna had never heard before, a sound like something tearing. They were both inside when it hit. Daniel had heard something in the air in the hour before, and had come in and said one word now, and she had understood, and they had done in 40 minutes what usually took the better part of a morning. Then the storm arrived, and the world outside stopped existing. How long, she said. He was adding wood to the fire. Judicious even now, careful, rationed thinking 10 hours ahead. 2 days, maybe 3. We have enough wood, if I'm careful. She looked at him. If we're careful. He glanced at her. The small correction seemed to land somewhere. If we're careful, he said. They settled in. The first day was manageable. The fire held the food, held the cabin held. They talked more than they usually did, not because the storm created some kind of forced intimacy, but because there is only so much silent activity 2 people can do in one room before language becomes the most practical option, and both of them were underneath everything, people who had things to say. She told him about her father, about the look on his face when he came home from the bank that day, about the way her mother had quietly, without drama, without complaint, rearranged the entire shape of their life to accommodate a smaller future, and how that rearrangement had been the most profound act of strength Anna had ever witnessed, and how it had taken her 20 years to see it clearly enough to name it. He told her about his business partner Marcus, not the accident, not yet, but before. The surveys they had done, the arguments they'd had about methods, about accuracy, about what honesty and measurement meant. He talked about Marcus the way you talk about someone who changed the way you think about everything, and he talked about him in present tense twice before catching himself, and each time it happened, his jaw tightened slightly, and he moved forward, and Anna did not press and did not look away. He would have liked you, Daniel said at one point without looking up from what he was doing. It stopped her cold. Why? She managed. He had a theory, Daniel said, that the most dangerous people in any situation were the ones who didn't know they were capable. He finally looked at her. He would have said you didn't know yet. Anna held very still. And what do you say? She said. He looked at her for a long moment. I say you're starting to figure it out. The second day of the storm was when she understood what she was actually made of. Daniel moved wrong. Early in the morning, she heard it before she saw it, a sharp intake of breath from behind the curtain that was not a sleep sound. And when she got up, he was sitting on the edge of his bed with his right hand pressed against his ribs, and a look on his face that was the specific particular expression of a man who is in significant pain and is engaged in an active argument with himself about whether to acknowledge it. "Then what happened?" she said. "Nothing. Daniel. Old injury." His jaw was tight. "Came back. It does sometimes in the cold." "Let me see." "It's fine." "It is clearly not fine." She was already moving toward him. "Let me see." He looked at her with those slate-gray eyes, and she looked back with the expression she used on dishonest children and obstinate school board members. And after a moment, he moved his hand. She looked. She had to work very hard to keep her face neutral. The scar ran along his ribs on the right side, old and pale and extensive. The kind of scar that tells a story about something that was very bad and very close. She gently pressed along the lower ribs. He made no sound, but under her fingers she could feel the tension of controlled pain, the fine tremor of muscles being forcibly kept still. "The fall," she said quietly. "Marcus's accident." "I tried to catch him," Daniel said. "Hit the rock face wrong." "How many ribs?" "At the time, 4. The colds got them inflamed." She sat back and thought quickly. Do you have willow bark or anything for inflammation?" "Medicine box," he said. "High shelf, left side." She found it. She made a preparation the way her mother had taught her a long time ago before her mother's hands got too unsteady to manage the work. She wrapped his ribs with strips of cloth from her suitcase cloth she had brought for God knew what reason, the instinct of a woman who had learned to pack for contingencies without being able to name them. He said nothing while she worked. When she finished, she stepped back. He looked at her hands, then at her face. "You've done that before," he said. "My father had a bad back," she said. "And my mother had bad winters." She began putting things away. "Rest. I'll manage the fire and the water." "You can't." "I have been managing the fire and the water for 3 weeks," she said not unkindly. "I think I can manage them for 2 more days." He opened his mouth. "Rest," she said again. He rested. She went out into the body of the storm and did what needed doing. She cut wood, not as fast as he would have, not as cleanly, but she cut it, and she stacked it, and it burned. She drew water from the spot he had shown her where the current ran too fast to freeze entirely. She fed the horses and latched the stable, that latch she had learned in the first hour and had not forgotten, and she came back in and rebuilt the fire and made food and checked on Daniel and went back out again. By nightfall she was so tired she could not feel her shoulders. She did not say so. She sat across from him at the table and ate the food she had made and met his eyes when he looked at her, and what was in his eyes was not pity and was not surprise and was not any of the things she had spent her life receiving from people who had just watched her do something they had decided she couldn't do. What was in his eyes was something she barely had a word for. Recognition. Like he was seeing finally and completely something that had been there all along. "Anna," he said. It was the first time he had used her name. "Yes," she said. He seemed to weigh several things. Then he said, "Thank you." 2 words. From a man who didn't use them lightly. She nodded once. "The storm's breaking," she said. "Listen." He listened. The wind had changed pitch, higher, thinner, the sound of something losing force rather than gathering it. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Tomorrow morning," she agreed. She cleared the plates. She banked the fire the way he had taught her, low and long, not fast and hot. She went behind her curtain and lay down on her narrow bed. And in the darkness, she pressed her palms flat against the rough blanket and felt the solidity of the world under her hands and thought, "I am still here." Not as a boast, as a simple, private, astonishing fact. The woman they had watched step off the wagon. The woman Gus had not quite laughed at. The woman Fen had handed an envelope. The woman who had been called delicate and slight and fragile her entire life by people who mistook the size of a thing for the content of it. She was still here. And so was Daniel Cross, who had lived alone for 8 years because the mountain didn't ask why, and who had just said her name like it was something worth saying carefully. The storm moved east through the night. In the morning, Anna was up first. She had the fire rebuilt and water boiling, and the first good light coming in through the east window before he appeared from behind his curtain, moving more easily than the night before the inflammation down. He stopped when he saw the fire. The pot. The cup waiting near the hearth. He looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them said anything, because some things by then they had already said, and the ones that hadn't been said yet were beginning to take up a particular kind of space in the cabin. The kind of space that isn't empty at all, but full. Full the way a held breath is full. The way a word is full in the moment before you speak it. December arrived without ceremony. The mountain didn't announce the shift. It simply became itself more completely colder, quieter, more absolute in the way it pressed down on everything beneath it. The light changed. The days shortened until they felt almost theoretical brief gray windows between two kinds of dark. The cold stopped being something that happened to you outside and started being something that lived with you, that sat at the table with you, that you bargained with every morning when you rebuilt the fire. Anna had stopped counting her mistakes. Not because she'd stopped making them, but because she'd started thinking of them differently. A mistake was just information you hadn't had yet. The mountain was teaching her a new language the same way the mountain had taught Daniel, and she was learning it the same way she had learned every language she'd ever learned, by refusing to be embarrassed by not knowing it yet. Daniel watched this change in her, the way he watched everything quietly, from a slight angle with the patience of someone who has learned that the most important things reveal themselves only to people willing to wait. He didn't say anything about it, but he started adjusting, small things at first. He stopped reaching for things she was reaching for. He stopped arriving at a task a half-second before her, which she now understood had been unconscious. The reflex of a man so used to being alone that he didn't yet trust the presence of another person's competence. He started leaving certain decisions to her. Which provisions to use first. How to rotate the wood supply. When the horses needed more feed versus more water. She noticed every adjustment, the way she had noticed everything about him, and she said nothing about them, because saying something would have made them self-conscious, and self-conscious was the one thing that could destroy what was quietly building between them. What was building between them was trust, not the soft kind. Not the kind that comes from sentiment or proximity, or the gentle blur of attraction. The hard kind. The kind forged from watching someone do difficult things and not fail at them. The kind that means something because it was earned in conditions that did not allow for performance. She didn't know yet what to do with it. She suspected he didn't either. It was in the third week of December that the first real test came, and it came in a form so ordinary that its danger was invisible until it was almost too late. She had gone to draw water from the creek the same route she had taken 40 times, the same footing she knew well enough by now to navigate in poor light when the bank gave way. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just a quiet, treacherous shift of the frozen earth beneath her left foot, and then she was down one leg through the ice at the edge where the current slowed and the freeze was thicker than it looked. Water pouring into her boot with a cold so sudden and total it drove the air from her lungs. She was back on solid ground in 4 seconds. She counted them. Not at the time she found out later, thinking back that 4 seconds was exactly how long it had taken her body to respond before her mind caught up. Get weight off the weak point. Roll right. Push up on the knee. Up. She was standing dripping boot full of water heart hammering when she heard Daniel on the bank above her. He had heard the crack of ice from 50 yards and arrived at a dead run, which was the first time she had ever seen him move that fast, and the look on his face in the moment before he saw she was upright was something she filed away in the private part of her mind that she did not examine in front of other people. He saw she was standing. He stopped. "Boots wet," she said, because it was the first practical thing she could think of to say. He looked at her for a count of 3. Then he came down the bank, took the water buckets from her, and walked back without a word. She followed, squishing with every step, and she might have found it funny, except that her toes had stopped reporting information, and that was not funny. That was a medical situation. "Sit," he said when they got inside, pointing at the chair nearest the fire. She sat. I was already moving boot off her foot in both his hands, checking the color of her toes, pressing, assessing with the same rapid efficiency with which she had assessed his ribs 2 weeks before. "I'm all right," she said. "You're borderline." He kept working, rubbing warmth back into her foot with his hands. "How long were you in the water?" 4 seconds. He looked up at her. "You counted?" Force of habit. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he went back to her foot. 4 seconds in that temperature in a boot, you caught it early. Another 10 and we'd have a problem. "I know," she said. "That's why I got out in 4. His hand stilled briefly on her foot. He started again. "You moved right," he said, not quite a question. "The ice was weaker on the left. The current pushes from the right, so the freeze would be more solid there." He was very quiet. "I've been watching how you test ice," she said simply, "since the first week." His hands kept moving, steady and warm, and he didn't look up, but something in the set of his shoulders changed that settling. She had come to recognize the way he moved when something had confirmed rather than surprised him. "The reading," he finally said. "From the notebooks. Have you been—" "No." Her voice was clear. "I told you I wasn't going to, and I'm not." She paused. "But I have been watching you. That's different." He lifted his head and looked at her straight on. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." He dried her foot. He handed her a dry sock from the line near the hearth. Her sock, one she had washed 2 days ago. He had taken it off the line and placed it near the heat without mentioning it, which meant he had noticed without being asked, which she filed alongside all the other things she was filing. She put the sock on. "Thank you," she said. "Don't fall through the ice again," he said. "I'll make every effort," Anna said. That time, the corner of his mouth moved further than she had seen it move before. The notebooks came back into the space between them, not because she raised them, but because he did. It was a Sunday evening. She had kept her small calendar faithfully. It mattered to her, the counting of days, and they were on opposite sides of the table. She, with the arithmetic exercises she had been writing out for the children she intended to return to in spring. He, with what she assumed was his own work, until she glanced up and saw the composition notebook open in front of him. How was writing? She looked back at her own papers immediately. She kept her expression exactly neutral. She turned a page, made a mark, moved on. "It's a record of the elk migration patterns," he said without preamble. She kept her eyes on her papers. "I see. From the last 6 years. I've tracked the herd sizes, the timing shifts, the correlation with temperature and snowpack in the upper elevations." She looked up. I was looking at the notebook, not at her. His posture was the particular stiffness of someone who has made a decision to say something difficult and is committed but not comfortable. "If the patterns hold," he said, "the western herd is declining, about 8% per year. At that rate, in 12 years they're functionally gone from this range," she said. He looked at her. "Basic mathematics," she said. "I teach arithmetic." He was quiet. "Who would need to know this?" she asked carefully. If anyone were going to do anything about it." "There are people in Denver," he said slowly, "at the Territorial Survey Office, and a man at the university. He was a colleague of my father's. He studies land use wildlife." He stopped. "It doesn't matter." "It clearly matters," she said, "or you wouldn't have written 6 notebooks about it." His jaw tightened. "Daniel." She set down her pencil. "You have built in this mountain over 8 years, a body of knowledge that could change how people manage this land for the next century. And you have it on a shelf behind the dried beans." "It's not." "It is." She held his gaze. "You know it is." The fire crackled. Outside, the wind moved through the dark at its own pace, indifferent to the conversation happening inside the walls. "I'm not the same person who would have gone to Denver and presented something at a survey office," he said at last. His voice was level, but it cost him something to say it. "I know," Anna said. "But the work doesn't care who you are now versus who you were. The elk don't care. The mountain doesn't care." She paused. The work is the work. He looked at her for a long time. Then he closed the notebook. But he didn't put it back on the shelf. He left it on the table, and the next morning it was still there. Christmas came and went with the quiet practicality of people who are too busy surviving to make ceremony of things. And then January arrived like a sentence being completed, all the cold that December had been promising delivered in full, without apology. Anna had thought she understood cold before January. January corrected her. It was not the temperature alone. Though the temperature was extraordinary, it was the weight of it, the way it pressed on everything, the way it took up residence in the walls and the floor and the space between her shoulder blades and refused to leave. The fire was constant work. Everything took longer in cold than complete. Water thickened in the barrels. Leather stiffened. Simple tasks required twice the effort because your hands didn't fully cooperate, and your body was spending so much energy on staying warm that everything else got a reduced allocation. She did not complain. Not once. Not to him. She complained privately and specifically to Birch, who received her grievances with the equanimity of a horse who had seen harder winters and would see harder still. Birch did not judge. Birch simply breathed warm horse breath into the cold air and pressed her nose against Anna's shoulder, and Anna stood in the stable and breathed back and felt each time marginally more capable of going back inside and doing what needed doing. Daniel knew she suspected that she talked to the horse. He said nothing about it. He was not a man who named things that didn't need naming. The second major test came in the third week of January, and it arrived on two fronts at once, which the mountains seemed to prefer, not one problem cleanly, but two problems tangled together, each making the other worse. The first was the supply problem. The winter had been harder and longer than the previous two, which Daniel knew because he tracked it, and his tracking told him they had used provisions at roughly 1.5 times the expected rate. The extra person her was a variable he had accounted for, but the duration of the cold was a variable that outpaced his account. By his calculation, they had enough flour and dried meat to last through February. Comfortably. If February came and went normally. But February was showing no signs of arriving normally. He told her this one morning without softening it, the way he told her everything, and she sat with it for a moment and then said, "What can we reduce? Not can we get more, or how bad is it, or any of the backward-facing questions. What can we reduce? Forward-facing. Operational." He felt the particular internal shift he had started to recognize as what happened when Anna Caldwell surprised him, which was a thing that kept happening despite the fact that he was no longer approaching her with any expectation of being unsurprised. "Flour by 1/3, he said. "Dried meat by 1/2. I can hunt if the weather gives me a window. The elk herd's close, I tracked signs yesterday." "When you hunt," she said carefully, "how long are you gone? If conditions are good, half a day. If I have to track a day, maybe more. And if conditions go bad while you're out." "I know the terrain." "I know you know the terrain," she said. "I'm asking what happens to me." The question was not fear. It was logistics. He understood the difference because he had been listening to her think for 2 months now, and her thinking was always logistics first, feeling second. Not because she didn't have feelings, but because she had learned that feelings needed a stable ground to stand on, and stable ground required operational thinking. "If I'm not back in a day," he said, "the supplies will last you 10 days without me consuming them. The horses know their way to the valley if you let them choose the path. Clara Hobbs will." "I'm not leaving," she said. He stopped. "I'm not leaving the cabin without you," she said. "So we can cross that off the plan." "Anna, I mean it." Her voice was quiet and absolute. "Make a different plan." He looked at her across the table. She looked back. The fire spoke between them for a moment. "I'll go in 2-day windows," he said finally. "If I don't return by nightfall of the second day, you take Birch to the valley." "Nightfall of the third day," she countered. 2.5. "Done," she said. He went hunting the next morning. She spent the day alone in the cabin for the first time in 2 months. And the aloneness had a different quality now than aloneness had ever had before in her life. Not the aloneness of someone who has no one, but the aloneness of someone whose person is temporarily elsewhere. She noticed the distinction with the part of her brain that was always quietly cataloging her own interior, and filed it without commentary, because commentary would have required her to think about what it meant, and she wasn't ready for that yet. He came back before dark. He had a buck, which would extend their provisions significantly, and he was cold and tired, and he set the animal down outside, and came in, and she had water heating and food ready, and he sat and ate and said nothing for a while, and then said, "You didn't worry." "I planned," she said. "It's different." "Is it?" "Worrying is what you do when you feel helpless," she said. "Planning is what you do when you're not." She looked at him. "I wasn't helpless." He looked at her over his cup. "No," he said, "you're not." The second front of the third-week problem was the one neither of them had planned for. It came in the form of a rider. A rider in January on the upper mountain meant one thing. Something had gone badly wrong at the level below. Nobody rode up here in January for casual reasons. The cold was too real, and the trail was too dangerous, and the only thing that sent a person up this mountain in this weather was genuine emergency. Anna heard the horse first. She was outside bringing in wood when she heard it not Birch in the stable, a different horse moving from the south trail, and she dropped the wood and went to the door and called inside. "Someone's coming." Daniel was there in seconds. The rider was a boy. 15, maybe 16, wrapped in more layers than fit easily around a teenager's thin frame. And his horse was blowing hard, and his face was the color and texture of someone who has been terrified for several hours and is still not sure the situation is over. "Mr. Cross." The boy pulled up. His voice cracked on the name. "Jesse." Daniel knew him. Of course he knew him. "Get down. What happened?" "It's my father." The boy got down in the stumbling, barely controlled way of someone whose legs have stopped being fully reliable. "He went out 2 days ago checking the south fence line, and he didn't come back. And we found him this morning, and his leg is broken. He's been out there all night in the cold, and my mother can't. We can't move him, right? And we don't know if he's—" "Where?" Daniel said. "South pasture, half-mile from the fence line. I marked the spot with, 'I know the south pasture.'" Daniel was already moving back inside for his coat and kit, the medical kit that Anna had reorganized in November, and now knew the contents of, as well as she knew anything. "Jesse, take my horse. He's faster and he's fresh. I'll follow on yours." "I can ride with you," the boy said. "I know the way." "You've been riding 4 hours in January cold," Daniel said. "You're going inside and you're getting warm, Anna." He looked at her. "Jesse needs—" "I have him," she said. She was already at the boy's elbow. "Come inside, now. Don't argue." The boy looked between them with the shell-shocked compliance of someone too exhausted to do anything but what he was told. Daniel was gone in under 4 minutes. She sat Jesse down and gave him heat from the fire and food from the pot and wrapped a blanket around him with the brisk, matter-of-fact care that communicated, "You are safe now, I have you," without using any of those words. He shook for a while. She let him shake. Then the shaking slowed, and the color came back to his face, and he looked at her with eyes that were trying to figure out who she was and why she was here. "You're the teacher," he said. "From the valley, Miss Caldwell." "I am up here. Living," she said simply. He absorbed this. Are you and Mr. Cross?" "We have a practical arrangement," she said in exactly the tone she had used with Daniel the first day. And Jesse, who was 15 and not stupid, received this without further inquiry. "Is my father going to be all right?" he said. She looked at him directly. "I don't know yet," she said. "But Mr. Cross knows what he's doing. And your father survived 1 night in the cold, which tells me something about what he's made of." Jesse looked at the fire. His throat worked. "He's a hard man," he said. "People say he's too hard." "People say a lot of things," Anna said. The boy was quiet for a moment. Then, "He used to say I was too soft, that I wasn't going to make it out here." He said it with the particular flatness of someone who has heard something enough times that it has sunk past hurt into something more structural, more load-bearing. Anna looked at him. "Jesse," she said. He looked at her. "You rode 4 hours alone in January on a hard mountain to get help for your father," she said. There is nothing soft about that. His face did something complicated. He looked away quickly back at the fire the way boys do when they've been caught feeling something they haven't given themselves permission to feel. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. Some things you say, and then you let them sit in the silence and do their work. Daniel came back 7 hours later with Jesse's father across the saddle, alive and furious in the specific way of men who have been seriously injured and are embarrassed about it. His name was Earl Marsh, and his left leg was broken cleanly below the knee. Bad enough but clean, which was as much luck as a man deserved after a night on frozen ground. He had built a lean-to of fallen branches in the first hour, which was why he was alive. He had stayed conscious through the night by reciting every verse of scripture he had ever memorized, which was apparently considerable. Anna had the table cleared and a fire stoked and water boiling before Daniel got the man through the door. "Set him here," she said. "I don't need a woman fussing," Earl started. "No one is fussing," Anna said at the exact same moment she was cutting away his boot with a knife she had already sterilized in boiling water. "I'm setting your leg, which is what needs to happen before infection makes the decision for us. You can argue with me after." Earl looked at Daniel. Daniel looked back at him with the expression of a man who has spent 2 months learning that arguing with Anna Caldwell on a practical matter is an exercise in complete futility. Earl pressed his lips together and said nothing more. She set the leg. Daniel held. She worked. It was not the first time they had operated as a unit under pressure, and they moved with the coordinated efficiency of people who had learned each other's rhythms, not through design, but through necessity, through weeks of shared work in close quarters, where inefficiency had real costs. When it was done, Earl was pale and breathing hard, and deeply silent in the way of men who have just been reminded that pain is real and their body is not invincible. "Rest," Anna said. "Jesse will stay with you tonight. In the morning, when you can manage transport, Daniel will take you down to the valley." "I can't impose," Earl started. "You're not imposing," she said. "You're recovering. Those are different things." Earl looked at her for the first time without the film of pride and embarrassment between them. "You're the teacher," he said slowly. "The one from the valley." "Yes. People said you wouldn't last the winter." "People say a lot of things," she said. He was quiet. Then gruffly, with the effort of a man who didn't make this kind of concession easily, "You've got good hands." She accepted this for what it was. "Get some sleep," she said. That night, after Jesse and Earl were settled, and the cabin had found its specific late-night quiet, Daniel and Anna sat by the fire in the aftermath, that particular state of exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from doing exactly as much as was required, which somehow costs more. "You didn't hesitate," he said. "There wasn't time to hesitate. There's always a moment where you choose," he said, "whether to go toward it or away from it." He looked at the fire. "Some people go away." She understood he was not talking about Earl's leg. "Who went away?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time. "After Marcus," he said finally. "There were people who thought they knew what I needed, who made decisions for me because they thought I couldn't make them myself, who tried to manage what happened, contain it." His jaw tightened. "I wasn't angry at them. I understood it, but I couldn't be near it." "So you came here," she said. "So I came here." "And no one went away from you here," she said. "Because there was no one here." "That was the point," he said. She looked at him across the fire. "And now," she said. He met her eyes. The fire spoke. The wind moved outside. "Now," he said slowly, "someone is here who doesn't go away from things." Her heart did something quiet and significant. "No," she said. "I don't." "I know." His voice was low. "I've been watching you for 2 months. You go toward things, toward the hard thing every time." A pause. I had forgotten people like that existed. She held very still, because what he was saying was not small. From Daniel Cross in that cabin, in the language they had built over 2 months of shared survival. What he was saying was enormous. "You're not the only one who had forgotten," she said. He looked at her. She looked at him. And in the silence that followed, the way a held breath is full, the way a word is full in the moment before you speak it. Something settled between them that was no longer just trust. It was something older than trust. Something quieter. Something that did not need a name yet to be completely, irrevocably real. Outside, the mountain held them both in its indifferent ancient arms. Inside, the fire burned low and warm. And Anna Caldwell, who had come to this mountain with one small suitcase and a letter full of promises that turned out to be nothing, sat beside a man who had never promised her anything except a roof and provisions and the truth, and felt for the first time in longer than she could name that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, which was a feeling so unfamiliar that it took her several days to trust it. She tested it the way she tested everything, quietly, methodically, from multiple angles. She watched how she felt when she woke up in the morning. Not the surface feeling, not cold or tired, or the fire needs rebuilding, but the feeling underneath those things. The feeling that told you what your life actually was when you stripped away the noise. What she found consistently was here. Not here, as in this cabin, this mountain, this specific Thursday in late January. Here, as in present. Accounted for. In the right place, doing the right thing with the right person. She did not say any of this to Daniel. She said it to Birch, who received it with characteristic equanimity, and pressed her nose into Anna's palm and breathed out a long, warm breath that was Anna had decided the hoarse equivalent of, "Yes, I know, I noticed too." Daniel, for his part, was doing his own version of the same reckoning. She could see it in the way he moved around her, not differently, not with any of the awkward performance of a man who has realized he has feelings and doesn't know what to do with them. More like a man who has been carrying something at one angle for a long time and has quietly shifted his grip because he found a better one. High-mod small adjustments. He handed her things before she asked for them. He started telling her unprompted what he was planning to do during the day. Not checking in, not asking permission, just sharing the way you share information with someone whose awareness of your movements has become important to you. He began leaving the second composition notebook open on the table in the evenings, the one with the plant observations, and once, just once, he slid it toward her side of the table and said nothing, and she pulled it close and read for an hour while he worked on his own calculations, and neither of them spoke, and it was one of the most comfortable hours she had spent in years. She didn't touch his pencil marks. She just read. When she finished, she slid it back. "Your observations about the root systems," she said. "The correlation with elevation. What about them?" "You're right," she said. "But I think you're missing something. The soil composition at the upper boundary. I've seen the rock type up there. It's different. The acidity would change the uptake pattern." He looked at her. "How do you know about soil acidity?" "My uncle's farm," she said. "He was obsessed with it. He could tell you the pH of a field by the color of the clover." Daniel was very still for a moment. Then he pulled the notebook back, turned to a fresh page. "Tell me what you saw," he said. "Exactly." She told him exactly. He wrote it down. In the margin, in his small, precise handwriting she saw later when he left the notebook open and she was putting things away and couldn't help seeing he had written AC Upper Elevation Soil Comp. Verify Spring. AC. She put the notebook down and went to tend the fire and did not examine the feeling that produced in her sternum, because examining it would have required more stillness than she currently had available. Earl Marsh and Jesse had gone back to the valley 4 days after the rescue. Earl on a sled Daniel had rigged with the efficiency of someone who had improvised transportation in bad conditions, before Jesse riding alongside with the particular subdued gravity of a boy who had come up the mountain, one kind of person, and was going back a slightly different kind. Before they left, Jesse had stood at the cabin door and looked at Anna with those young, tired eyes and said, "My father wants me to apologize for what he said when you set the leg." "He doesn't need to apologize," Anna said. "He knows that," Jesse said. "He wants to anyway." She smiled at that. "Tell him I've heard worse." He also said. Jesse paused, seemed to be deciding how much of what his father said to pass on. "He said you remind him of his mother. She came west from Virginia in a wagon with 3 children and a husband who died before they reached Kansas. She made it the rest of the way herself. Anna looked at him. "That's the best thing anyone has said to me since I got here," she said quietly. Jesse nodded with the seriousness of a boy carrying a message he knew mattered. "Miss Caldwell," he said. "Are you going to stay in the valley, in the spring?" She glanced back at the cabin. At the window where the light was on, and Daniel's shadow moved across it with the steady, purposeful movement of a man doing work that mattered. "I think so," she said. "Yes." Jesse followed her glance, nodded again slowly with the particular wisdom that teenagers acquire when they have been frightened badly enough to strip away their certainty about how the world works. "Good," he said. He rode away down the mountain. She went back inside. The storm that changed everything came at the end of January. Not the manageable storms she had learned to navigate by then. Not the 2-day affairs that required extra wood and careful provisioning and came out the other side with everyone intact. This was something different. Daniel knew it was different before the first flake fell, the same way he had known things about weather for 8 years, that bone-level fluency with the mountain's moods. "Anna," he said on the morning of the 28th. She was at the table with her arithmetic papers. She heard the register of his voice and looked up immediately. "Tell me," she said. "There's a system coming from the northwest," he said. "Big. The kind we get once every 4 or 5 years. He was already moving to the window, looking at the sky with the focused attention of someone reading urgent text. "We have maybe 6 hours before it hits." She stood up. "What do we do first?" This was, she realized later, one of the most important questions she had ever asked in her life. Not how bad will it be, or should we leave, or are we going to be all right? What do we do first? Because the only productive response to a big problem is always the same. Identify the first necessary action and take it, and then identify the next one. Daniel looked at her with an expression she had come to understand as what his face did when something she did or said confirmed something he needed confirmed. "Wood," he said. "Everything we can bring in. Then food inventory, I need to know exactly what we have. Then the horses, they need extra feed, and the stable door needs a second latch. The wind on this kind of storm comes from the northwest, and that door faces northwest," she said. "I know. I'll do the stable while you do the wood. Together on the wood first, then stable, then inside, and we stay inside." She was already getting her coat. They moved through the 6 hours like a single machine, with 2 parts that had been calibrated to each other. She no longer had to watch him to understand what came next. She anticipated it the way you anticipate the rhythm of a song you've heard enough times that your body knows it. He stopped checking to see if she'd finished a task, and started simply knowing the same way she knew, and they wove through the preparation in the cold gray morning air, with the efficient wordless grace of people who have earned each other. When the first heavy snow hit, they were inside. The sound of it was extraordinary. Anna had thought she understood what Daniel meant by a big storm. She understood now that she had been working with a completely different scale. This was not weather. This was the mountain deciding something, exercising some fundamental authority over everything in its range, and what it was saying in the plainest possible terms was everything stops now. "How long?" she said. Daniel was at the window for only a moment. Visibility gone already. Nothing but white and dark before he stepped back. 3 days, he said. Maybe 4. She absorbed this. Counted their provisions in her head. She had done the inventory. She knew the numbers precisely. "We're all right on food. Wood is the question." "I know." "What did we bring in?" 4 days at normal use." He paused. "We'll need to run lower on the fire than comfortable." "How low?" "Survivable," he said. "Not comfortable." She looked at him. "Then that's what we do," she said. The first day was hard. The second day was harder. Not because of the cold, though the cold was extraordinary. The fire kept low meant the temperature inside the cabin dropped to something that required them to wear their outdoor layers indoors, to sleep in more layers than was comfortable, to move constantly, because stillness let the cold in through your skin in a way that had to be experienced to be fully believed. It was hard because of what prolonged confinement in extreme conditions does to people. Even people who trusted each other. Even people who were past the stage of performance and pretense. The walls pressed in. The noise of the storm was relentless, not loud exactly, but constant. A sound that went on so long, it stopped being heard and started being felt, a vibration in the base of the skull that made everything slightly more irritating than it would otherwise have been. On the second morning, Anna burned the oats. She was tired and cold, and she misjudged the fire, and she burned the oats, and she stood there and looked at the burned pot and felt the familiar weight of the word failure. But this time, it had a harder edge to it because burned oats in this storm on day 2 was not an abstraction. It was a real cost in a situation where costs were real. Daniel came in from checking the stable. He looked at the pot. He looked at her. She was already dealing with it, scraping what could be saved, assessing what was lost, calculating the adjustment to the day's provisions. "It's about 2 portions," she said without preamble. "We can make it up if we go lighter at midday." He said nothing for a moment. Then he took the pot from her and finished scraping it himself with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone who is not making a point, just helping. "It happens," he said. "Not to me," she said, and heard immediately how that sounded tight and proud and slightly ridiculous. He glanced at her sideways. "It happens to everyone," he said. "I once burned an entire day's worth of venison in my second winter. Fell asleep watching the fire." She looked at him. "What did you do?" "Went hungry," he said simply, "and paid better attention." She took the pot back. "That's an extremely unsympathetic story." "It wasn't meant to be sympathetic," he said. "It was meant to be true." She stood there holding the pot, and then unexpectedly she laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one, short and genuine and surprised out of her. And Daniel looked at her with an expression that was startled, and then something warmer, and the corners of his eyes did what she had never seen them do before, creased in a way that meant the smile had reached all the way up. The tension in the room broke. She put the pot down, and he poured the last of the coffee. Real coffee, saved for exactly this kind of moment, and they sat across from each other in their outdoor layers inside their cold cabin in the middle of a 4-day blizzard and drank it. "Tell me about Denver," she said. He looked into his cup. "What do you want to know? What did you love about it?" A long pause. "The work," he said at last. "The surveys. You go out and you measure the actual land, the real distances, the real elevations, and you put them on paper, and the paper becomes the thing people use to understand where they are." He turned the cup. "There's something about accuracy, about insisting that the true measurement matters, that it's worth the trouble to get it right." "You still do that," she said. "The notebooks. That's different." "Is it?" He was quiet. "The surveys were for people," he said, "to use. The notebooks are—" He stopped. "Say it," she said quietly. He looked at her. "They're for me," he said, "because I had to keep doing something that was true, something that couldn't be taken or lost, or something where the accuracy was the whole point." A pause. "After Marcus, I didn't trust anything I had built with other people. Everything we had made together was gone, but the mountain was there, and it was exactly what it was always, whether I was looking at it or not." She held very still. "Daniel," she said. He looked at her. "The notebooks aren't just for you," she said. "They never were. You know that." His jaw was tight. "A man who builds something only for himself," she said carefully, "puts it behind the dried beans. He doesn't write 6 volumes. The fire crackled between them. "What are you saying?" he said. "I'm saying," she said, "that you came here to be alone, and you built something worth sharing anyway, because that's who you are, not who you were before Denver, who you are." He looked at her for a long time. Outside, the storm threw itself against the walls of the cabin with the absolute conviction of something that does not know it won't win. Inside, something cracked open in Daniel Cross's face. Not broke, cracked open. The way good earth cracks in the first thaw, and what came through it was not weakness, but exactly the opposite. "I don't know how to," he started. "I know," she said. "You don't have to." He nodded once, looked away, looked back. "You've been here 3 months," he said. "I know. And you're more here than anyone I've known since Marcus." His voice was level, but the words cost him. "More present, More I don't know the right word. Real, she offered. He looked at her. Real, he said. The word sat between them solid and exact the way words are when they're the right ones. She did not look away. Neither did he. The twist came on the third day of the storm in the form of a sound from the stable that was not right. Daniel heard it first. He was on his feet before she processed what she had heard, that particular quality of attention that comes from 8 years of living somewhere that communicates in sounds. He was at the door with his coat already on. "Stay here," he said. "What is it?" "Birch." His voice was tight. "She's in distress." "I'm coming." "Anna." She was already at the door. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then he opened it. The cold hit like a wall. The storm had not lessened. If anything, it had gathered itself on the third day into something more deliberate. Wind driving the snow, horizontally visibility, almost nothing. Daniel moved through it with the certainty of a man who knows this ground below the level of sight. She followed close, one hand on the back of his coat, not because she was afraid, but because losing visual contact in this was a genuine danger. The stable. Inside. Birch was down. Not down the way a horse goes down peacefully. Down wrong. Her breathing was labored, her sides moving with the rapid, shallow urgency of an animal in pain, and she was not responding normally to Daniel's voice and hands, which meant whatever was wrong had gone past discomfort into something more serious. "Colic," Anna said immediately. "Looks like it." He was already on his knees. "Bad one. How long she's been down?" "She was standing when I checked at midday. That was 3 hours ago." 3 hours. He pressed along her abdomen. Birch made a sound that went through Anna like a wire pulled tight. "It's a gas colic. If we can get her up and moving." "Tell me what to do." He told her. What followed was 2 hours that Anna would remember for the rest of her life. Not because they were dramatic in the way stories are dramatic, but because they were real in the way life is real, messy and exhausting and uncertain, and requiring every single thing you had. They got Birch up. It took 15 minutes of patient, relentless effort, talking to her, working with her, not against her. Anna on one side, Daniel on the other, both of them soaked in sweat, despite the cold. And when Birch finally lurched to her feet, the sound Anna made was not a word, just a breath, just relief, made audible. They walked her. Back and forth in the stable, slow circles, constant contact. Anna talked to the horse. She talked to her the way she had been talking to her privately for months, in the direct, honest, slightly absurd way you talk to animals when you love them and don't care who hears it. "You are not allowed to do this," she told Birch quietly. "You hear me? We have too much left to do. You are going to walk this off, and you are going to be fine. I have not come all this way and survived this winter to lose you in a storm. That is not how this ends." Birch's ears tracked her voice. Her breathing was still labored, but it was changing, still fast, but fuller. The gas needed to move, and movement was what moved it, and they kept walking. Daniel was watching her. Not the horse. Her. "Keep talking," he said quietly. "I am keeping talking," she said. "Don't interrupt." He stopped interrupting. An hour and a half later, Birch dropped her head and passed gas with the magnificent, inelegant force of an animal who has just been through something terrible and is now definitively on the other side of it. Anna leaned her forehead against the horse's neck. Her legs were shaking. She had not let them shake until now. Daniel's hand came to rest on her shoulder. Just that. His hand on her shoulder. Steady. "She's all right," he said. "I know." Anna's voice was muffled against Birch's neck. "I just need a moment." "Take it," he said. She took it. When she straightened up, she was herself again, composed, present, clear-eyed, with the particular clean steadiness that comes after genuine fear has passed through you and you have not let it make your decisions for you. He looked at her. "I've never seen anyone talk a horse through colic quite like that," he said. "She responds to voice," Anna said. "She always has." "She responds to your voice," he said. "I've talked to that horse for 6 years. She's never looked at me like that." Anna looked at Birch, who looked back at her with dark, calm eyes. "She's particular," Anna said. She is, Daniel agreed. He paused. Anna. The way he said her name had been changing for weeks. This particular way, quiet, direct, with a weight behind it. That was not urgency, but something slower and more serious this way, was new. She turned to look at him. What happened tonight? He said. You coming out here, staying, working with her for 2 hours in this. He stopped. You didn't have to. She's mine too, Anna said simply. As far as I'm concerned. He absorbed this. As far as I'm concerned, he said slowly, you're right. She held his gaze. Outside, the storm continued its absolute indifferent authority over everything. Inside the stable, in the lamplight with Birch. Breathing steadily between them, something completed itself. Something that had been building since the morning she had walked into a general store in Harrow's Creek and said, I'm Anna Caldwell. I came to teach school. Something that had grown through every hard day and every honest conversation and every task done without complaint and every silence that was full rather than empty. He reached out. He took her hand. Not as a gesture, not as a beginning or an overture, as an arrival, as the acknowledgement of something already true. Her hand in his was cold from the work. His was warmer. They stood there in the lamplight and held on with the simplicity and completeness of people who have stopped pretending about what they need. We should get back inside, she said. Yes, he said. But he didn't move yet. Neither did she. She looked at their hands. At the stable door with the latch she had learned to fix in the first hour of her first day. At Birch, standing now steady and whole. Daniel, she said. Yes. When the storm ends. Yes. I want to write to your father's colleague, she said. In Denver. The one at the university. I want to write to him about the notebooks. His hand tightened on hers. Not in protest. In something else entirely. All right, he said quietly. We'll do it together, she said. The letter. I'll write the words, you tell me what they need to know. A long pause. All right, he said again. She looked up at him. You built something real, she said. It deserves to be seen. His face did the thing it had done on the second night of the big storm, cracked open all the way. No going back. And what was in there behind 8 years of wilderness and grief and the particular dignity of a man who had survived by refusing to need anyone? What was in there was not what the valley called dangerous. It was not dangerous at all. It was a person. Whole and scarred and enormous in the way of people who have absorbed real loss and not let it make them small. She knew because she was one. He let go of her hand. He pushed the stable door open against the wind. She went through, first head down into the white wall of the storm. He followed. They crossed back to the cabin together, close, one moving through the dark and one following both of them, knowing by now with absolute certainty which one of them was, which at any given moment, and how to switch. The fire was low when they got inside. He built it up. She made the last of the coffee. They sat down across from each other in the warmth of the rebuilt fire, and outside the storm ran out of night to fill and started running out of fury, and the sound of it, that relentless constitutional howling, began very slightly to ease. She heard it first. Listen, she said. He listened. The wind dropped half a register, then another. Tomorrow morning, he said. Tomorrow morning, she said. She wrapped both hands around her cup, looked at the fire, looked at him, and Daniel Cross looked back at Anna Caldwell across the table in the cabin he had built alone with his own hands in the middle of a mountain that didn't care about appearances. Looked at her with those slate-gray eyes that had spent 8 years reading the truth out of everything, and what he saw was what he had been seeing for 3 months. What he had been learning to trust was really there, and not a thing he was inventing out of loneliness or need. A person who went toward things. A person who stayed. A person who could walk into a general store with one small suitcase and a broken promise, and look a stranger in the eye and say, I'm not afraid, and mean it. Not because she didn't understand the danger, but because she had decided the danger was worth it. You know, he said, when I told you not to be late that first morning. I remember. I didn't think you'd actually come, he said. She looked at him. I know, she said. That's why I was early. The fire cracked. Outside, for the first time in 3 days, the wind went quiet enough that she could hear faintly the mountain itself. That vast, patient, fundamental silence beneath the storm, unchanged and unchangeable. There before the storm, and there after it, and there long after both of them would be gone. She sat with it. She let it be. And she did not feel small, which was itself a kind of revolution, quiet and private and complete, the kind that doesn't announce itself with any particular moment, but arrives the way the thaw arrives, not all at once but undeniably. And then you look around one morning and the world is different, and you understand it has been changing for longer than you knew. The storm broke on the fourth morning. Daniel was right, as he was right about most things that had to do with the mountain, and she had stopped being surprised by this and started simply factoring it in the way you factor in the properties of any reliable instrument. She heard the quality of silence change before first light. The absence of the wind's constant pressure. The way the air in the cabin felt different, less besieged, and she was up and dressed before Daniel came out from behind his curtain. He found her with the fire rebuilt and the door open 2 inches. Her face turned toward the gap, reading the morning. 4 days, she said without turning around. 4 days, he confirmed. He came to stand beside her, and they both looked out at what the storm had left behind, which was a world remade in white and absolute stillness. She felt him look at her instead of the landscape. "You're not looking," she said. "I've seen it before," he said. "I haven't seen you looking at it before." She turned. He was watching her with an expression she had learned to read by now, that particular quality of attention he gave only to things he found genuinely worth studying. "What do you see?" she asked. "Someone who isn't afraid of it anymore," he said. She thought about that. "I was never afraid of it," she said. "I was afraid of not being enough for it." He was quiet for a moment. "And now?" She looked back out at the white world. "Now I know the difference between those two things," she said. "That's enough." He made coffee. She packed what needed packing. They moved through the morning with the practiced ease of people who have shared a space long enough that their movements no longer interfere with each other, but complement the way 2 instruments in the same key don't clash, but build. The letter to Denver was already written. They had composed it together over 3 evenings in the last week of the storm. Her words, his knowledge, his precision in her syntax. Her instinct for what a stranger needed to understand, layered under his specificity about what the data actually showed. The result was something neither of them could have written alone, which seemed exactly right. She had addressed it to Professor William Aldgate, Department of Natural Sciences, University of Colorado. She had sealed it herself and put it in her coat pocket where it lived now, like a small solid fact against her ribs. "We send it when we get to the valley," she said. "We send it," he agreed. That we. She noticed it every time. She suspected he did too. The ride down took longer than the ride up had, because the trail was buried, and Daniel had to read the ground through the snow, the way he read everything by understanding what was underneath, not just what was visible on the surface. Anna followed his line, exactly trusting his judgment, with the total unthinking confidence that had replaced the careful, watchful trust of the early weeks. Early trust is deliberate. This kind was structural. It held her up without her thinking about it. They were 2 hours down the trail when she heard him change the rhythm of his horse's pace. A slight hesitation, a recalibration, and she looked up to see him stopped at a bend in the trail, looking at something below. She came up alongside him. Below them, still half a mile down, she could see movement. People. Not one or two, several, moving along the base of the trail that led from the mountain toward the valley. "Who is that?" she said. Daniel's expression was something she couldn't read immediately. "Harrow's Creek," he said. "Half the town by the look of it." She stared. "Why would they?" "Earl Marsh," he said quietly. "He made it down. He's been talking, I'd guess." She looked at the people moving below, moving toward them. Something locked tight in her chest. "Daniel." "I know." "Whatever they say, Anna." His voice was low and certain. "Whatever they say, I know what this winter was. I know what you did. Nothing they say changes the actual thing." She looked at him. He looked back at her with those gray eyes that had been reading the truth out of everything for 8 years. "Right," she said. She squared her shoulders inside her coat. "Let's go down." Clara Hobbs was at the front of the group, which was exactly what Anna would have predicted, and the sight of that gray-haired, sharp-eyed woman standing in the snow, with her hands on her hips, and an expression that combined relief with something that looked suspiciously like vindication. That sight did something to Anna's throat that she had not expected. "You're alive," Clara said when they were close enough. "I am," Anna said. "And whole. Entirely whole." Clara looked at her for a long moment, with the particular thorough assessment she had used the very first morning when Anna had stood on her porch with a suitcase and bad news. Then she nodded once with the decisiveness of someone completing a calculation she had begun months ago and finding the result correct. "Good," Clara said. "We were worried." Anna looked past her at the people gathered behind. She recognized faces: Rudolph the blacksmith, Beth Pierce from the general store, Walt Chambers, who had stood at the edge of the churchyard, watching his daughter trace letters in the dirt. She recognized Jesse Marsh standing slightly apart with his hands in his pockets and his chin up, and Earl next to him on a rough crutch, his broken leg bound, and his face carrying the specific, complicated expression of a man who has something to say and is working up to it. She recognized Aldous Fenn. He was at the back of the group. He was not looking at her directly. He was looking at the middle distance in the way of a man who has been forced by circumstances to be present somewhere uncomfortable and is trying to appear as if the discomfort is incidental. She felt Daniel stop his horse beside her. She did not look at Fenn. She would deal with that in its order. First things first. "Jesse," she said. The boy looked up. "Your father made it down all right." "He did," Jesse said. "He told people." A pause. "He told everyone." Anna glanced at Earl. Earl met her eyes for the first time, and there was something in his face that she recognized from her father's face a long time ago, in the rare moments when her father encountered something that genuinely surprised him about the world, and didn't know yet whether to be glad or troubled by the surprise. "Miss Caldwell," Earl said. The words came out with a controlled deliberateness that told her they had been prepared. "My wife sends her thanks. She says—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "She says if it weren't for you and Cross, she'd be a widow. And my boy would—" He stopped again. He had not, she suspected, gotten this far in his rehearsals. "You don't need to say it," Anna said. "I do," Earl said. His jaw was set. "I'm not a man who leaves things unsaid when they should be said. I was wrong about you. First time I saw you, I thought—" He looked at her small frame, her travel-worn coat, the practical steadiness of her stance in the snow. "I thought what everybody thought." "I know what you thought," she said. "It's all right." "It's not," he said flatly. "It's not all right, and I'd rather say so than pretend it is." His voice went rougher. "You set my leg in a blizzard. You kept my son warm. You—" He shook his head. "A man should know when he's wrong. I was wrong." The group was very quiet. Anna looked at Earl Marsh, this hard, proud, difficult man on his crutch in the snow, paying a debt that cost him something real. And she thought about Jesse riding 4 hours alone in January, and Earl surviving a night on frozen ground by reciting scripture, and how the people who are called too hard and the people called too soft are often the same people in different lights. "Thank you, Earl," she said, simply and directly. He nodded. Something in his posture eased. Then from the back of the group, Aldous Fenn moved. She had been waiting for this. She had been, if she was being precise about it, waiting for this since the day she walked out of his office and left his envelope on his desk. Fenn came forward through the group and stopped at a distance that was slightly too far for intimacy and slightly too close for formality, which seemed exactly right for what he was. "Miss Caldwell," he started. "Mr. Fenn," she said. "I owe you." He paused. "Reorganized. The community has discussed there has been, in light of recent events, the board has agreed to fund the reconstruction of the schoolhouse, fully, to begin in spring." Another pause. "And to offer you an official position, salaried, with proper housing." The group waited. She waited too for a moment. "That's very good news," she said. "For the children. And for you," Fenn said with the careful hopefulness of a man extending an olive branch and not sure of the reception. That depends, she said. He blinked. On what? On whether the position comes with actual authority over the curriculum, she said. And whether the board understands that I will teach every child in this valley who wants to learn, regardless of whether their parents think they need it. She paused. And whether there is a clause allowing me to continue working with materials and individuals outside the formal classroom when I judge it to be in the community's educational interest. Fenn stared at her. That's... He glanced around, found no rescue. That's yes. I believe those terms are acceptable. Then I accept the position, Anna said. Clara Hobbs made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but occupied the same emotional territory. Welcome back, Clara said, in a tone that suggested Anna had never really left, and they had both known it all along. What happened next was both more and less than Anna expected. More because small communities in hard places have a particular relationship with the people who survive things they weren't supposed to survive. It is not quite reverence and not quite respect. It is something older and more practical than either a recognition of demonstrated capacity that goes into the community's shared knowledge, the way a good tool goes into the shared workshop. You know where it is. You know what it does. You reach for it when you need it. Less because Anna had not come here for recognition. And recognition, even genuine well-earned recognition, was not the thing that fed her. The children were what fed her. The learning was what fed her. The moment a concept moved from the outside of a mind to the inside of it. That click of understanding landing. That was what she had come for, and what she had never stopped coming for, through every cold morning and burned pot and condescending look. They went back to Clara's boarding house that first night, she and Daniel both, because the practicalities of coming down from a winter on the mountain included a list of necessities, and Clara's was the right place to address several of them at once. Daniel was uncomfortable in the boarding house, in the way he was uncomfortable anywhere with more than 3 people in it, but he managed it with the quiet, self-contained determination of a man who has decided that some discomforts are worth tolerating. Clara fed them both and asked no personal questions, which was the most generous thing she could have done. Later, when Daniel had gone out to see to the horses, and Clara and Anna were alone in the kitchen, Clara poured 2 cups of something stronger than coffee and pushed one across the table. So, Clara said. So, Anna said. The winter. The winter, Anna agreed. Clara looked at her with those river-stone eyes that missed nothing. You're different. I know. Stronger, Clara said. Not harder. That's rarer than people think. Anna wrapped her hands around her cup. I had good material to work with, she said. The mountain. The work. She paused. The company. Clara's mouth curved. The company. Don't, Anna said, but without any particular conviction. I haven't said anything. You were going to. I was going to say, Clara said, that I told you he might listen to you. I didn't tell you why I thought so. Anna looked at her. Why did you? She said. Clara was quiet for a moment, looking into her cup. Because he's a man who lives by what's actually true, she said. Not by what's convenient or comfortable or what makes social sense. By what is actually genuinely, verifiably true. She looked up. And you are genuinely, verifiably remarkable, Anna. I knew it the morning you wouldn't take the envelope. I knew that a man like Daniel Cross, if he saw you clearly, would be incapable of not seeing it. Anna was very still. He sees clearly, she said at last. Yes, Clara said. That's what I mean. The letter to Denver came back in 6 weeks. 6 weeks was fast. Fast enough that the return letter, when Anna pulled it from the hands of the delivery rider who had come up from the rail depot with the spring mail, had the feeling of something urgent, something that had moved through the postal system with purpose rather than meandering. She brought it to Daniel. How was at the table with a new notebook. The 7th she had noted started in February, and he looked at the envelope in her hand and then at her face. Open it, she said. It's addressed to both of us, he said. She looked at the envelope. He was right. Mr. D. Cross and Miss A. Caldwell. The handwriting was hurried and educated. "Then we open it together," she said. She sat across from him. He opened it. Professor William Aldgate wrote with the barely contained excitement of a man of science who has just been handed something he didn't know he needed until he saw it. He wrote that the data in their letter, the migration patterns, the elevation correlations, the soil observations, Anna had contributed, represented in his words, the most significant ground-level natural survey of the Colorado mountain range's eastern face that he had encountered in 20 years of study. He wrote that he would like, with their permission, to visit the mountain in summer. He wrote that he was in correspondence with a man at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington who had expressed the word he used was urgent interest in the work. He wrote that Daniel Cross's father, Professor Edmund Cross, had been contacted and had responded by return post with 2 words. Those 2 words were at the bottom of the letter in a different hand. Older, more deliberate. The handwriting of a man who chooses each mark on the page carefully. About time. Daniel read those 2 words. He read them again. His face did something Anna had never seen it do before. Something that had nothing to do with the careful, controlled expression of a man managing his own interior. His face simply opened. All the way. Without strategy or self-protection. She saw in that moment the boy who had gone to the wilderness because he couldn't bear to be seen grieving. And she saw what 8 years of honest work in the mountain had made of that boy. Something extraordinary. She did not look away. She didn't say anything either, because there was nothing to say that would be more useful than silence, and she had learned by now the difference between a silence that needs filling and one that needs keeping. He folded the letter, set it down. "My father," he said. His voice was rough. "Yes. We haven't corresponded since. I know. He used to say He stopped. "The only honest education is one that teaches you how small you are," she said quietly. "You told me." He looked at her. "Write to him," she said. A long pause. "I don't know where to start," he said. "Start with the notebooks," she said. "Start with what you've built. Let him see what you've been doing with all this time." She paused. "He already knows you're still his son. He said so." Something moved through Daniel's face that she understood, because she had felt the same thing herself, that specific complicated relief of being known by someone who was supposed to know you, of finding that the connection you thought was severed was only bent. He picked up his pen. He started writing. She got up and made coffee and set his cup beside him and went to her own work at the other end of the table, and neither of them spoke for an hour. And the silence between them was the full kind, rich and warm, the kind that only exists between people who have earned it. Spring came to Harrow's Creek with the deliberate, unhurried authority of something that doesn't need to prove anything. The schoolhouse went up in April. Daniel helped build it, not because Fenn asked, but because Walt Chambers asked man to man, and because Daniel had decided quietly, and without announcing the decision, that the valley was going to be part of his life, in a way it hadn't been before, and that the school was part of the valley, and that Anna was part of both. She watched him work alongside the other men from the window of Clara's boarding house where she was writing out her first official curriculum for the new Harrow's Creek school. She watched the way the other men adjusted to him tentatively at first, the careful distance they'd always kept, and then gradually less carefully as Daniel worked and spoke plainly, and didn't perform either danger or friendliness, but simply was there, present and capable and honest. Walt Chambers said something to him at one point that made Daniel pause in his work and look up and whatever. Chambers said. Daniel nodded once in response with the particular quiet gravity that was as close as he came to being moved by something in public. Later she asked, "What did Walt say to you today when you stopped working?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "He said his daughter can read now," he said. "He said she read a letter aloud to the whole family last week, from her grandmother in Missouri." Anna looked at her hands. "He said he didn't know what he'd been thinking," Daniel continued, "before, about what she was worth." She pressed her lips together. "He told you that," she said. "He said to tell you." Daniel looked at her. "He said he didn't know how to say it to you directly, but he wanted you to know." She sat with that for a moment. Maggie's face tracing letters in the dirt with a stick in September. The first 4 lines of a poem recited without stumbling. A little girl reading a letter from Missouri aloud to her family in the lamplight. "That's why," Anna said quietly. "That's the whole reason." "I know," Daniel said. She looked at him. "You always knew what I was doing here," she said. "Even before I was sure myself." "Yes," he said. "That first day, in the general store." "Yes." "What did you see?" she said. "Really?" He thought about it. Someone who was done being managed, he said. Someone who had decided to be exactly what they were and let other people adjust to it. He paused. "I recognized it. It's what the mountain taught me." She looked at him across the table. "And what did the mountain teach you?" she said. "In the end." He was quiet for a long moment. "That the only things that survive here are the things that are genuinely completely themselves," he said. "The mountain doesn't tolerate pretense. It doesn't care what you claim to be. It only responds to what you actually are." He held her gaze. "You came up that mountain, and it tested everything you claimed to be, and everything you claimed held." She felt the words settle into her, the way truth settles not loudly, but permanently. "You held too," she said. "I had help," he said. She shook her head. "No. You built something real alone over 8 years in conditions that would have broken most people. You held it together when you had every reason not to. I didn't give you that." She paused. "I just saw it." He looked at her. And then he said the thing that had been true for months, that they had both known in the specific way you know things before you have the words for them. "Stay," he said. "Not the arrangement, not the winter, not the school." His voice was steady and quiet, and absolutely certain. "Stay, because this is where you belong. Because I am asking you to. Because this valley, this mountain, this—" He stopped. Started again. "Because I cannot build what comes next without you." She was very still. Outside, the spring moved through Harrow's Creek with its quiet, inevitable authority. The children who had learned to read their letters over the winter were somewhere out there, moving through a world that had more doors in it than it did 6 months ago. Jesse Marsh was probably helping his father in the south pasture on the leg that had healed well better than expected. Birch was in the valley stable where the light was better. The 7 notebooks were in a satchel in Anna's room, addressed to Denver, ready to send, and in the kitchen of Clara Hobbs's boarding house. Anna Caldwell, who had arrived in Colorado with 1 small suitcase and a letter full of nothing, who had been told her whole life that she was too small and too slight and too fragile for a world like this one, who had rebuilt fires in the dark and cut wood until her shoulders burned, and talked a horse through colic in a blizzard, and set a broken leg in a storm, and written a letter that was going to change how a mountain was understood, looked at Daniel Cross and felt the answer in her chest before she had found the words for it. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I haven't been going anywhere since the moment I got here." He reached across the table. She put her hand in his. Same cold, same warmth. Same 2 people who had come to the mountain for different reasons and found the same thing there. The absolute clarifying truth of who they actually were when the world stopped telling them who they were supposed to be. "Good," he said. She looked at him. This man who had built a life from honest work and honest grief, and 6 years of elk migration data, and the patience of someone who had learned to wait for what was real. "Good," she said back. Outside, Harrow's Creek went about its morning. Children ran. Men worked. The mountain stood exactly as it always had, enormous and indifferent and ancient, asking nothing of anyone except the truth. Daniel Cross and Anna Caldwell sat in the spring light with their hands on the table between them, and they were exactly, completely, and without apology themselves, and that in the end was the only thing either of them had ever needed to be. Not small, not fragile, not the sum of what anyone else had decided they were. Just true. And truth in a place like this was the only thing that ever lasted.